from me. Also, a shout out to Surfshark VPN for being the sponsor of this video. Number 11 is AirPower, not a smartphone, but a smartphone related bit of tech. Number 11 is AirPower, not a smartphone, but a smartphone sponsor of this video. Number 11 is AirPower, not a smartphone, but a smartphone related bit of tech. Well, it ended up being a bit of a no-show. Back in 2017, alongside the iPhone X, Apple showed the world wireless charging done right. A pad that you can place your devices anywhere on and they'll just start charging. And this was massive because whilst Apple is never really the first to enter new product categories, generally when they do, they tend to set a new industry standard. Not this time. The next 2 years were a constant swirl of rumours and teasers. AirPower was mentioned explicitly in iOS updates as a supported feature, and quite literally on the physical packaging of the second generation AirPods. But come 2019, Apple cancelled it. RIP AirPower. See, with normal wireless charging, the back of your phone has one coil and the charger has another coil, and placing these two coils together creates an electromagnetic field that delivers power to your phone. But the only way that Apple's idea was possible, the idea of having an entire pad that could deliver charge, not just one specific spot on it that you had to line your phone up with, is by packing many wireless charging coils into a tight space. And in the end, the company couldn't find a way of doing this without either the electromagnetic fields interfering with each other or just generating too much heat. So, not the kind of fail that's gonna cripple a company like Apple, but at the same time it will mean that future announcements are just treated with a little bit of extra doubt. 3 out of 10 for this one. Now, in the last couple of years, we've seen quite a lot of smartphone companies that we previously loved just kind of fade away, disappear into almost non-existence. And for each one of them, there's usually been 1 or 2 mistake devices, phones that have been so bad that they've kind of set them on the path to ultimately failing. For example, HTC in 2020 is dead as a dodo. They've fallen from an 11% market share in so bad that they've kind of set them on the path to ultimately failing. For example, HTC in 2020 is dead as a dodo. They've fallen from an 11% market share in 2011 to less than 0.1% now. And there are a whole number of factors, but one phone that really sealed their fate was the HTC U Ultra. See, there was a time when I was actually excited about HTC phones. You might remember the HTC One. It had a beautiful metal unibody with a gorgeous display, and the company collabed with Beats to make its boom sound speakers. It even had a software skin that people didn't hate, which was more than you could say for a lot of phones at the time. This phone could have been a turning point for the company had they continued the innovation, but they followed up with a couple of mediocre phones and then one just bad one. And with the insane pace of the smartphone market, you just can't afford to do this. The big selling point of the U Ultra was a secondary ticker display that nobody asked for. The battery sucked, and instead of building on their great Beats audio technology, they removed it. Alongside the headphone jack, which at this time was still a pretty sensitive topic. So, considering where HTC once was, and where they are now, the U Ultra's getting a 4 out of 10 fail. Number 9 is LG and their G5. See, there was a point when LG was soaring in the smartphone market. Their G3 was one of the first phones in the world with a Quad HD display, and it was a genuinely competent alternative to buying a Samsung or an iPhone. Unfortunately, life's not...
Занятие, ошибка. sucks. What is it? What is it? Somebody...
Алло.
Алло, здравствуйте. Звонили мне, да? Это
Здрасте. Да.
простите, это я просто не узнал, кто это.
Я вам ой, в профи с вами там по поводу вокала.
По поводу... объявление по поводу... Да.
Да.
Да. С профи... понял. Да. Здравствуйте, да. То есть, да, заниматься будете, да?
Ну, хотелось бы. Я вот занимался, мой преподаватель пропала куда-то. Ну, как пропала? Она уехала там в другой город, и с ней я потерял связь, и хотелось бы продолжить то, что я, занимался около года. Ну, так, с перерывами, конечно, там, то сё. Вот, хотел бы продолжить, потому что я так понял, что я все забыл и все растерял навык весь.
Понятно. Ясно, то есть для себя заниматься надо, да?
Да.
Ясно, ну хорошо, что же теперь, то есть можем начать заниматься. Так, вы как будет заочно или как это? То есть...
Я не понял, еще раз.
По интернету, да, по скайпу будем заниматься будем, да?
Ну да, скайп там, либо другие мессенджеры, это
Да.
там как бы нет проблем.
Хорошо, ладно, да, и нормально тогда можно, в принципе, начать, посмотреть, послушать, как бы у вас, так сказать.
Ну давай, когда у вас время? Мы просто сейчас на дачу едем, к вечером вернемся, можно вечером?
Ну, хорошо, так, сегодня у нас чего? У меня сегодня вечером тоже уроки будут, к сожалению.
Ну хорошо, давайте тогда, знаете, как поступим? В WhatsApp, вы уже в WhatsApp бываете, да?
Да, в WhatsApp есть, да.
Да, в WhatsApp спишемся, и я свободен сегодня вечером, и завтра в течение дня можно договориться о времени,
Хорошо.
собственно, и все.
Ну, хорошо, сегодня вот в течение дня, это у нас как будет просто проходить? Вечером это вот, например, во сколько для вас? Просто ваше время такое.
6, 7, 8, 9.
6, хорошо. Я
по Москве.
По Москве, ага. Ясно, ну да. Ну ладно, так можно, в принципе, и сегодня тогда, потому что у меня тут тоже, если разнообразие времени, можем сегодня, если у вас...
Ну все, давайте я буду ехать с дачи, я вам напишу, что я там буду готов в такое-то время.
Хорошо, если вы не
Все, все хорошо. Давайте.
Спасибо. Да наоборот. Не знаю, это наоборот. Английская тема, говорит. Brandon, thank you, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Viewers. Great. Телебук. Почему все подряд просто? Ладно. Все подряд.
Always good. The G4 that came after shipped with what could only be described as cursed software. Tens of thousands of G4s would just randomly start shutting down. They'd restart, and they'd even get stuck in continuous boot loops. People were mad at LG, but thankfully they'd restart, and they'd even get stuck in continuous boot loops. People were mad at LG, but thankfully the G5 was coming. The company's one shot at redemption, at reminding their fans why they loved LG in the first place. So they announced a phone that you can stick a grip onto. The LG G5's big selling point was the fact that you can attach modules, things like a camera grip that adds some extra battery. But considering that LG is not exactly going to sell tens of millions of G5s, an ecosystem of modules built just for this one phone is destined to fail. Nobody's going to want to make these modules, because instead of just building a universal gadget that could appeal to billions of smartphone users across the world, you'd be building a gadget that at its absolute maximum could appeal to, let's say, the 3 million people who actually bought a G5 specifically. So, just like with HTC, it only took a few not-so-great phones for LG to kind of lose its place in people's hearts. So again, the G5 gets a 4 out of 10 from me. Number 8 is BlackBerry. Oh, BlackBerry. Of all these smartphone companies that have gone from riches to rags, BlackBerry's fall is definitely the most dramatic. It's hard to believe, but we're talking a company that used to have a 50% market share in the US. 50%! And they've gone from that to a quite literal zero. BlackBerry is gone, and their Z10 smartphone pretty much embodies the entire reason they failed. BlackBerry never understood why people wanted a smartphone. To be clear, they were insanely successful before the smartphone era, and it feels like this made them complacent. When people got their first taste of iOS and Android, and they started wanting a proper app ecosystem, BlackBerry completely misjudged it. They thought, oh, maybe it's touchscreens that people want. So they made a touchscreen version of their existing phone, which, by the way, was one of the worst smartphones in existence. When this didn't work, BlackBerry could have, and probably should have, just dropped everything and tried to build the best possible Android phone. But they missed the mark again. They thought, we know what it is. What people really want is a proper smartphone operating system. We'll get them this time. So they built the BlackBerry Z10 running on their new in-house BlackBerry 10 OS. And to its credit, it finally felt like a smartphone. But again, they failed to realize the importance of apps. BlackBerry thought that because security used to be one of their big selling points, they should focus on that again, which meant that they couldn't make this OS as open source and as developer-friendly as they needed to. Again, a fatal mistake. So, to reiterate, I don't think the Z10 is the worst phone BlackBerry's ever made. They've had some real shockers in their time. But just like with HTC and LG, the bigger failings are often not the one-off mistakes you make. It's quite easy to recover from a mistake. The real problems come when you start heading down the entirely wrong path, and the Z10 was exactly that for BlackBerry. 5 out of 10. This was messy. Number 7 is Samsung's Bixby virtual assistant. It's become a bit of a joke in the tech community. See, the thing is, for most Android users who want Big Tech, this was messy. Number 7 is Samsung's Bixby virtual. Start heading down the entirely wrong path, and the Z10 was exactly that. When you stop one-off mistakes you make, it's quite easy to recover from a mistake. The real problems come when you start heading down the entirely wrong path, and the Z10 was exactly that for BlackBerry. 5 out of 10. This was messy. Number 7 is Samsung's Bixby virtual assistant. It's become a bit of a joke in the tech community. See, the thing is, for most Android users who wanted a virtual assistant, Google Assistant did pretty much everything they needed to anyway. And so when Samsung launched Bixby, because it didn't really have one killer feature that was instantly going to make people jump over en masse, their only option was to force people to use it.
Google Навыки – это новая платформа, где можно бесплатно освоить профессии и навыки.
Samsung's phones would start coming preloaded with Bixby as their default virtual assistant, and they had a dedicated button to summon it, like some sort of genie that could just about tell the weather. It didn't help that Bixby at launch was both slower than Google Assistant and it struggled massively with accents. It's almost a shame, because Bixby's gotten loads better since launch. We're at a stage where there's two camps of people, those that have never heard of Bixby, and so don't really care, and those who know all about it, but having seen it through its rocky start, basically think it's a meme at this point. Knowing Samsung though, having seen it through its rocky start, basically think it's a meme at this point. Knowing Samsung though, they won't stop pushing Bixby as much as I want them to. So I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. Number 6 is the Amazon Fire Phone, and it was a monumental miscalculation. See, the way Amazon's business model works was a monumental miscalculation. See, the way Amazon's business model works is they sell ultra cheap hardware, like the Kindle, like the Echo, but the reason they still make money from them is because these devices become a portal for people to then buy other stuff from Amazon. For example, by getting a Kindle into as many people's hands as possible, Amazon can sell more ebooks from the Amazon bookstore. Anyways, the Fire Phone operated with a similar concept, but it was so much worse. For starters, it was little more than a glorified portal to the Amazon App Store, but the company also tried to push a feature called Firefly, which allowed you to take photos of things in the real world, and oh so generously gave you a link to buy them from, you guessed it, Amazon.com. They even had the audacity to remove the Google Play Store, all but ensuring that every digital purchase made on this phone goes directly to Amazon. And the icing on this cake was that, unlike their other hardware products, which somewhat make up for this by being cheap, the Fire Phone wasn't priced right alongside Apple's iPhone. It didn't help that the Fire Phone wasn't priced right alongside Apple's iPhone. It didn't help that the Fire Phone's coolest trick was a set of 4 cameras that enabled something called dynamic perspective, which was a bit pointless priced right alongside Apple's iPhone. It didn't help that the Fire Phone's coolest trick was a set of 4 cameras that enabled something called dynamic perspective, which was a bit pointless at the best of times and performance-inducing at the worst. So the Fire Phone was comically bad. It was both the beginning and the end of the company's mobile efforts, and Amazon took a $170 million L just trying to make it. The only reason it isn't further down on the list is because Amazon as a company had enough going for them in other areas that they could put that down 170 mid with the beginning and the performance-inducing at the worst. So effective, which was a bit pointless at the best of times and performance-inducing at the worst. So the Fire Phone was comically bad. It was both the beginning and the end of the company's mobile efforts, and Amazon took a $170 million L just trying to make it. The only reason it isn't further down on the list is because Amazon as a company had enough going for them in other areas that they could just sort of pretend this didn't happen. Still though, they're quite deserving of a prestigious 6 out of 10 fail. Number 5 is Essential, a company that hit the ground flying in the smartphone market. But in 4 short years, they went from crushing it to crashing in it. See, Essential was started by Andy Rubin, referred to as the founder of Android, and he made a whole load of claims about what Essential was going to do. It worked. Before even making a single product, Essential had hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, and the company was valued at over $1 billion. Again, without making a single product. With that in mind then, you probably saw where this was going. Yeah, they screwed it up. But not just once. First up was the smartphone, and it wasn't terrible. Visually, I'd say it was one of the most futuristic phones on the market.
Народ, я так думал, просто. Так. Ой, ну наоборот, да нет, сюда, блин, сидите, наоборот, эй. Наоборот, miscalculation. Ну, наоборот. Вот так вот. Ну, ладно, не всегда, но достаточно. Ну, вот наоборот, значит, это творчеством просто уже. Ну, это он и говорит о тебе. Ага, он тебя так думает. Вот это голос. Ну это о себе он так думал, что у тебя. Ладно. Наоборот, да. Вот это и был он самый несведанный просто. Да, наоборот. Наоборот. Ты че? Ну ты, ну, вообще просто... Ты чё, блин, вообще просто так, ну, да, опять там этот, зум опять там, да. Какого его не было вчера. Зум, просто если программа, если это обеспечение программное, да не, я понял. Да. Да. Ну вот это есть. Сейчас. Вот плачешь, да. Предком плачешь. Я не вижу просто основания для этого. Я еще даже не разобрался, что это такое. Ну пусть будет так. Нет, не в этом дело, я не про это тебе говорю. Ну наоборот, игра, значит, да, наоборот.